She is the SVP of HR at NBC Universal, Hoai Scott. Welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yes, this feels so natural. So why don't you just give us a brief backstory as to how you got to where you are currently?
Absolutely. I majored in psychology with the ambition to become a social worker. And I started doing internships, and I was like, wow, the problems of the world are really hard. So then I pivoted to human resources so I could serve people and in organizations in a corporate world. And that's when kind of the adult me was born. I also met my husband, Tommy, in college. He's a special agent for the Department of Homeland Security. He's on a federal SWAT team, right? And so he's a very impressive person that has been very elitely trained. And yet when he goes out in the world, he's at risk every day. But because he's a black man with a weapon, it's a death sentence for him. So I'm in a position to influence people, and particularly people who have power and privilege. And I talk about Tommy because it helps people understand that regardless of how talented you are, how hardworking you are, it doesn't matter in our country, right? It's a stereotype. And when he goes out in the world, we live in Calabasas, and he gets followed by the sheriffs when he's better trained than the people who are following him. Right? And we go to the store and he gets followed because he's trying to buy a pack of t-shirts, right? And so I am dedicating my life to changing the narrative in black and brown people that is life-threatening to so many of our beloved people, right? In the course of a 30-year career and advancing my skills, I now know the power of a human to ignite, right? People and movements, and I'm leveraging the power of a media company to do what's right and good for people in society.
So in conversations we've had, you've said it's very much your mission and purpose in life to challenge the status quo, cause some ripples. And I would say a lot of us want to do that, but that means potentially creating conflict. And it can be difficult to push through that fear, potential consequences. What advice or insight would you have as far as that's concerned?
So I think it's so key to be committed to a purpose, right? So there's this beautiful Cherokee birth blessing, and it says, may you live long enough to know why you were born. Right? May you live long enough to know why you were born. So I think you have to get very clear and committed to your purpose, because when you do that, you'll do anything it takes to achieve that purpose, right? So for me, I want to create communities of grace and belonging where everyone can contribute and everyone can thrive. And so I'm willing to put myself out there. I'm very uncomfortable doing public speaking, okay? So I am willing to make myself vulnerable. I'm willing to face my fears for the sake of this purpose. And then I think too, when you think about fearlessly authentic leadership, it is aligning with people, right, who want to serve that mission. But then as a leader, creating the space for them to leverage their unique talent and their unique experiences to contribute to that good.
Some of us here are already familiar with the work you've done and partnering of NBC Universal with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, or ARC. Can you tell us a little bit more about that partnership and how it even got started?
Yes. So this is my heart's work. So when you talk about facing your fears, right, it's all worth it for the sake of this. And thank you, Sam, for being here today. In 2018, our CEO learned about second chance hiring. And he learned that there's a group of people who are employable, loyal, promotable, hardworking, human, and they're discriminated against because of their history of being incarcerated. And so at the same time, he met Scott Budnick, who's a filmmaker, and the founder of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. And so Scott asked our chairman if he would host some interns. And our CEO, he very disruptive and transformational, and he said, yeah, let's do it, right? So we started this partnership, and we started providing internships for formerly incarcerated people. But since we started the program, we have hired 17 interns, we've hired 6 into full-time roles, and every human who is part of this has been changed by the experience. And
it just so happens that we have the executive director of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition in our midst tonight. His name is Sam Lewis. Sam, would you come on up and join us? Can you share a brief story as to how you became doing this work into this position?
So I grew up not far from here in South Central LA during the 80s, when LA was considered the crack capital of LA, or the country, the murder capital and the gang capital. I was a teenager. By the time I was 16, I had been shot twice. I had been stabbed. My mother's house had been shot up. And I dropped out of school. And it wasn't that I was not doing anything wrong. I was deeply immersed in both the gang and the drug culture. By the time I was 18, I had been sentenced to life in prison for murder that I committed in the commission of furtherance of the gang that I was involved with. When I went to prison, I thought that was it. High school dropout, could barely read and write. I was the poster child for a throwaway kid. I had two things, though, when I went to prison that I didn't realize. One, I had a mom that would not give up on me. The second was a daughter that was born a month after my arrest. She would come to visit on weekends, and when we color, I would be able to hold her. The very first time I held her was in Soledad's prison visiting room. She was just a little baby. About 7 years into my sentence, I had gotten into some trouble, and I was headed to what's called administrative segregation, where they send you to keep you away from being a threat to the institution. And my daughter came to visit me 2 days later. I couldn't write my family and tell them not to come, and my daughter had never seen me in chains or behind this thick, scarred up plexiglass. And when she gets to the glass, she climbs up on the stool and she looks inside and she sees the chains, and her look of curiosity turns to one of fear. And I knew as a father, it was not she was afraid, but what are they doing to my dad? And it just shook me to my core to see what I was doing to my daughter. My mom takes the phone from her. She says, "You understand now, everything you do, good or bad, impacts the people that love you the most." And as she's walking out, she turns around and she mouths the words, "Try hard." And I went back thinking about that. I wanted to do it and I didn't know how. All I knew was the gang. All I knew was what I grew up doing. But it planted a seed in my heart and in my mind. So I'm gonna fast forward. It didn't happen overnight. It took time. That's 7 years in. I did a total of 24 years in prison. I went to the Board of Parole hearings 9 times. And on the 9th time, through a court order, I was released. I finished my bachelor's degree to associate's degree, a bunch of facilitator training. And in my heart, I had always told my mom I wanted to figure out how to change the system, because when I went in, I didn't believe I was worthy of anything. I believed I was right where I was supposed to be, and that was not true. That transformation starts with the people that are in custody. However, the transformation also happens with prison correctional staff. When they see the transformation, they begin to support it. That transformation has to begin with people. When people say that prisons are the problem, a prison is a building. We have to figure it out as human beings and see that the people that are inside are still human beings, that as all of us have, they have failings. Well, I have failings. How do I help my fellow human being get to the next step?
We've had a conversation before, and I shared a story that someone once shared with me, and it was, let's say you go to a river. You see someone getting swept down the river, and you go out and you help pull them to shore. You take care of them. So we got to take care of them. And while you're helping that person, you notice another person getting swept down the river. So you go out and you help that person in. Before long, a third person's getting swept down. You bring that person on board. We have to take care of those people that are getting swept down the river. And many of ARC's programs, initiatives, and resources do that. But at some point, we have to ask, who's upstream throwing people in the river in the first place? What does that mean to ARC, that metaphor? Does that translate over to working with people inside, outside? How do we prevent from even getting involved in that system in the first place? Or is that too big a question to ask?
Absolutely not too big a question. So first, ARC currently works in 3 buckets, basically. One is policy, helping change laws to make our system more equitable. The second is rehabilitative programming inside prisons and juvenile halls. And the third is reentry programming, robust reentry programming. Now we can talk about that, but the one piece that we have been working on now is the prevention piece. We run a fire program, and like as Californians, we all know what fires are like. What firefighters do when there's a huge fire, they cut a break in a line to stop the fuel that's burning. And so what we're working on doing is creating the same type of break in what we call the school to prison pipeline.
One of the things I have a question for, because and I think you were talking about it earlier, I think it's being authentic, because we can bring people into our organization, but if the organization is not willing to accept them as their authentic self and not try to make them who corporate America wants them to be, I would love for you to talk about maybe some of the challenges or what programs you have to help people that have never worked in corporate, never worked for a majority white organization, have a white boss, that wants to come in, do great work, but they are coming with their authentic selves. So if you could speak on that a little bit, I would love to hear that.
So we are a company that is working to be anti-racist and create equity. And equity is not something you can mass produce. Okay, because you customize what the person needs in order to get them to the same place, right? And so what we're trying to do is we're training other companies on how to do this work. And so we've joined the Second Chance Business Coalition. And what they asked us to do is share our story of how did we do it. And part of it is at our company, we're trying to create spaces for people to thrive. So that means creating psychological safety, which Marissa talks about, right? And so if you can create an environment for people to be able to bring their full selves and their experiences and not be shamed or ridiculed or blamed, then you're going to optimize performance, right? We pick the right leaders, right, who are willing to be flexible, who are willing to accommodate, who are willing to change their language, right? All these things are important to somebody's experience. We had somebody who worked in a department, and the department used language that is typical for us, which is give it a shot, take a stab at it, right? We use that vernacular, right? But for somebody who is a victim of violence, that is triggering. And so we created a toolkit for our hiring managers so that they would know how to welcome somebody, how to make them feel like they belong, right? And we actually had an intern work at DreamWorks Animation. We actually had 3. And we do a debrief at the end of every semester, and we ask the interns, how was your experience? How can we be better? And he said, I went into this experience expecting to be an outsider. Because of my background and my prior experiences at work, I thought that I would be ridiculed and treated like an outsider. He said, now I know. He's like, it was the complete opposite. I was made to feel welcomed. I was made to feel like I belonged. And I used to think that I wouldn't make it in life. But now I know it's the choices I make now for a better future. And he said the possibilities are limitless.